Great. So thank you all for joining us today. I'm excited to have three wonderful leaders in the life sciences who work in a wide variety of different organizations to share their experiences, how they got to where they were, what kind of work they do, and hopefully this will paint a picture of just more options in terms of careers and things that you can consider in the life sciences in New York City. So I will let our speakers introduce themselves. And if you all could just share your name, what role you have, your organization, and if you could also share just how you found your way into your current role, and if it's something you expected to do as you were thinking about your career or not. And I'll hand it over to Matt first.
Hi, thanks a lot, Kaylin. So I am the head of healthcare research at an investment bank called Ladenburg Thalmann, and managing director there. So this was absolutely not where I expected to be initially as an undergrad. I had taken and focused on biology and also evolutionary biology as an undergrad, and did not take any business courses, did not read the Wall Street Journal, and actually was on the path to focus on a scientific career, doing either bench research or thinking about getting an MD. And so as the situation evolved, I ended up working at Albert Einstein studying gene regulation in the heart, and then found my way into consulting, actually. The consulting firm I joined was looking for somebody with a scientific background and to help them grow a biotechnology consulting practice that they had. So I took some risk early in my career and joined a group on the consulting side. And it was a very entrepreneurial group. We grew that business from about 4 to 5 relationships in biotechnology with biotechnology companies to 60 over about 4 years. And then we spun out our own broker dealer, actually, a small little broker dealer, where we hired somebody that had experience in terms of an analyst experience. And I helped her with the science side of the business, and she helped me learn the financial modeling and the financial side of the business. And then, make a long story short, we ended up selling that business to Thompson Financial. And then I joined another investment bank and helped them grow that business. So circuitous route, but yeah, absolutely not where I ended up, where I thought I would end up, but definitely very, made the right choice for me.
Thank you. And I'm going to pass it off to Sabriya next.
Hello, my name is Sabriya. I am the operations director for Stellate Therapeutics, of which Joshua already sort of introduced what we do a little bit. And similarly to Matt, this was not what I thought I would be doing, but I also didn't really know what I would be doing. I was planning my life in kind of 2 to 3 year chunks of time, and sort of allowing myself to be open to whatever opportunity kind of came across my radar. But that said, I did know pretty early on that I wanted to ground myself in research. I went to Virginia Tech for my undergrad, and I majored in biology. After I graduated, grad school was also not on the horizon. It was just like, I don't want to do school anymore. But I know I wanted to do science, and I was able to secure a fellowship at the National Institute of Health doing HIV research for a year. So yes, I knew I wanted to do science, and then kind of even a little bit more specifically, I knew I really was interested in infectious diseases and host pathogen interactions. And so that interest and curiosity actually really shaped and informed a lot of the decisions that I ultimately ended up making. So for example, getting this applying for this fellowship. And then after the fellowship, I worked at NYU doing tuberculosis research for about 2 years. And around that time, I realized, being a lab tech is cool and interesting. And I like that I can leave at 5. But I wanted to learn a little bit more about how I could be the one designing the experiments. And so I applied to grad school. And it seems like there's a strong Bronx connection here because I got my PhD at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. So I spent about 6 years doing that. And then again, like I said, I really knew I loved infectious diseases, but around the time I was graduating, I realized maybe kind of pursuing a more research-focused academic role was not where my heart was at. And at the time, I was in conversations with the Dean of Engineering at the City College, and they had just received a large amount of money to start a brand new master's program in translational medicine. And of course, I was like, oh, I don't even know what that means. And it turned out what it meant was, how do we teach scientists and engineers in the process of bringing a medical device to market? So really, what does a curriculum that blends engineering practices, business practices, and clinical practices look like? And so after many conversations, I decided to take this job, and I went from being the assistant director to the associate director. So I worked there for about 5 years, helping them build this brand new master's program that is still currently running. And I'm happy to answer more questions about that later if it's of interest to anyone. But then after 5 years, I kind of started peeking my head around and started seeing like what else was out there. And very serendipitously, a colleague of mine that I had known in the New York City biotech ecosystem reached out to me and said, hey, there's this position opening at this company that I work at, and I think you'd be a really good fit for it. It's the operations director. So again, I was like, I don't know what that means. And so but I took the job. Again, it was a little bit of a risk based on my background, but also based on the fact that working at a small biotech company does come with its risk. And I started there in February of this year. So very new to the job, just about 6 months in, and happy to talk a little bit more about that as well. But that's sort of my journey in a nutshell. Well, I would say my scientific journey in a nutshell.
Thank you. And last but not least for this question, Shazia.
So I guess like everyone else, it's my background's very non-traditional as well, and really not a straight path. I actually studied, I started off as a finance major in college, and I interned at various investment banks, and I thought that was the path I wanted to take just because that's what I was told would be a good way to kind of make a lot of money your first year out of school. So I was like, okay, why not? I then took an advertising class, and the professor was somebody that honestly, I just felt, I didn't even realize, first of all, this was a career option. You could actually make money doing something like this, working in this business. And after that, I realized, you know what, this was definitely a path I wanted to pursue. I started off though, definitely not in health at all. It was more on the consumer advertising side. So I worked on brands such as like Kraft, Maxwell House Coffee, Pantene shampoo, Snapple, anything and everything you could think of that's not health related. I was probably on the opposite spectrum of that. I even worked on Jaguar cars. So like a very different advertising experience than what we're doing right now. I did that for a few years, and I did it at the advertising agencies. I actually had various roles, everything from account management to strategic planning. I worked in new product development, which was actually really interesting. And I enjoyed it, and I thought this is kind of what I wanted to do. And I kind of accidentally found my way into the jobs that I am right now, and where I've been for now the past 17 years, which if it sounds weird saying that because it's probably older than some people on this call, but it's, you know, when I first started at that time, Havas wasn't called Havas, it was Euro RSCG. And that company, I was like, you know what? Okay, I'll do this for a little bit. I'm not sure I'm going to really enjoy the health space. I came in actually on the recruiting side of the business. So not even in the account management or strategic planning, it was completely different. And I was like, okay, I'll do it for a couple of years. And then I'm going to go back to my consumer advertising, doing what I did. And then here I am 17 years later. So over the past 17 years, I've held various positions in the company, everything from obviously starting on the recruiting side to running the recruiting group. I was then promoted to chief talent officer for the company. And then most recently, and that's most recently is like 5 years ago, to global chief of staff for our CEO as well. The company, when people ask me, they're like, oh my God, how do you stay at one place for 17 years? Honestly, our company has evolved so much over the past, not even 17 years, the past 5 years, really gone from being a company that focuses very much on the pharmaceutical health space and just doing, what you kind of like the advertising toward doctors, to really doing more consumer facing advertising. And now in the world of, digital and innovation, kind of doing anything and everything you can think of when it comes to the pharma world. And even beyond that, because I think the lines are getting so blurry and like what actually falls into health and wellness, we're starting to kind of go into I think our world has grown quite a bit. So we're now our company's roughly 4,700 people. We have offices all over the world. And some of our clients are, we work with Sanofi's our biggest client. We work with Pfizer, Novartis, GSK, pretty much any pharma company you can think of. One of our offices somewhere in the world probably has a relationship with them. So that's a little bit about what I do.
Thank you. So we've gone to hear a little bit about how you found your way into your role. Can you talk a bit about what skills are important in your roles? And additionally, when you're hiring, what skills are you looking for in candidates? And I'll let you choose. Whoever feels called to speak first can go ahead.
I'm happy to start first. So, one of the things I did as an undergrad, as a evolutionary biology major, was try to avoid taking any courses that were intensive in writing. But right now, that's what I do for a living. So I would, when I look for somebody for a position as an associate entering healthcare research or investment research, it's number one, strong writing skills. Number two, strong analytical skills. And of course, a scientific background is paramount, at least for, where I focus, the industry I focus on. So generally I look for somebody with an advanced degree, master's, PhD, MD, or somebody with industry experience. But again, it's paramount to have, very important to have strong writing and analytical skills.
Yeah, I would second that. A thing that I look for and also use quite frequently in the job that I have now and other jobs that I've had over the past years is two things. One, being able to solve a problem, and also knowing when to ask for help. It's one thing to say you're a self-starter and motivated, because I think that can be true of many people, but especially in the role that I'm in now, those two things have worked a lot well for me, but also in hiring people are things that I also look for as well. Saying, I don't know how to do that, but here's how I think I could do it, or here's, my plan to figure out how to do that. And then being humble enough to do those things. And then if you're still not getting the right answer, saying, okay, like I did this, but it's still not working, do you think you can help me out? Because that also, you spend a lot of wasted time, like running your, like having the wheels run in your mind when you could simply just say, I've tried some stuff, but it's not working and I could use some help now. So I don't really know how you would, tease that out on a resume, but that's definitely something that I have found to be important for myself and also in the people that we hire.
So for us, because we have such a wide variety of types of jobs, everything from like creative art copywriters to account people to strategists to user experience people, each job is a little bit different for kind of what we look for from just a pure skill set standpoint. But if I had to pick like a common thread that kind of goes through everyone that we look for out of school, I think they really bring a sense of curiosity to the workplace and almost like, kind of like come into it with, it doesn't matter what my title is, I'm not going to be afraid to speak up. And I think having that type of personality, you'll do really well in our industry and at least in our network. Somebody who's just not afraid to kind of question and challenge the way we currently are doing things, because like me, a lot of people that are at Havas have been with the company for 10, 15, 20 years. And we look to the people that we're hiring right out of school to kind of tell us, is there a better way to do this? Is there a different way to approach this problem? So I would say come in with curiosity and just, not be afraid to really challenge kind of what you're seeing and what you're asked to do.
Yeah, I'm hearing some great advice for interns to keep in mind as well. So thank you all. A question specifically for Shazia. Do you see any changes that have been happening recently in healthcare and life sciences marketing, either things as a result of the pandemic or just evolutions you're noticing in the past several years?
Well, a couple of things. So first of all, it's now cool to be in health. It's, health in the past, it was funny and I'll speak purely from a recruiting standpoint, in advertising, if you work on the consumer side of the business, it's cool. Like if you're selling Oreos or Heineken or, whatever, oh, that's so cool. That's like really fun. Now it's actually, I will tell you, to work on the COVID vaccine is cool. Like, work on products that are related to health and wellness is all of a sudden sexy. Like that's like, whoa, you mean you work on that? So I've really seen a shift in just when we're interviewing and recruiting candidates where people are normally where it was harder to get talent in from the consumer side, especially on the creative side, like art and copywriters, where they normally wanted to work on, the fun, and I use quotes, the fun stuff. Now they're actually really interested on the health side, in the health and wellness space. The second thing is just the growth that our industry on health and wellness marketing and advertising. I was reading a stat the other day, and then from 2017 to today, ad spend has doubled. So you've gone from like close to like $5 billion in 2017 to it will be over $12 billion this year. And that's a short period. When you think about it, like that's insane. It's an insane amount of money. It's an insane amount of growth. So I think those are just a couple of things that I've noticed. And I hope it continues. I also think there's a lot of goodwill right now toward pharma and health that, people are excited to talk about it. People are excited to get into it. And hopefully that continues.
Okay, great. So definitely an industry that has a lot of money coming towards it and possibly is growing. So a question for Sabriya and Matt. Do you have any thoughts on the current state of the industry, the biotech industry, and the direction you see it going? So either any changes you're noticing or just what direction do you see certain things in biotech moving?
Sure. I think right now the funding environment is really strong. You've seen over the last 2 years, 2020 venture capital funding, VC funds set records. And then in the first half of this year, we've almost exceeded those records for the full year of 2020. And also venture capital investments in healthcare, similarly extremely strong this year, and almost 2x of the first half of 2020. So, and it's really been led by the biopharma space. in terms of where that venture capital money is being invested. So you're talking about investments of over $20 billion in the VC side, in the biopharma space, and overall in healthcare over $47 billion in the first half of this year. So, and that includes, Series A investors, very strong this year in biopharma, two times the amount for the first half of 2020. And on top of that, the IPO window is wide open. We've had over, I think, about 50 IPOs in the biopharma space this year already. I think we're on track to probably have over 80. I think the second half will slow down a little bit, and we're seeing very similar trends in the tools space, in the device space, and the diagnostic space as well. So the dynamics are very good for funding. So which is very important for young companies, and also as companies move through different stages of development. Now, what we're seeing is also kind of the post-IPO performance this year has not been as good and as strong as 2020 or 2019. But nevertheless, the companies are still, instead of being up over 100%, they're up over 50%. So still strong environment for funding. IPO window appears wide open. And, for me, the outlook is absolutely strong. I think the second half of the year is going to be weaker than the first half, but the trends and the capital is robust. So it's a great entrepreneurial environment. It's a great funding environment for young companies as well. So.
I think for me, the biggest trend isn't necessarily so specific to one aspect of biotech, but the fact that we're just even talking about it in this way. The master's program that I helped start came into inception around the same time that this LifeSci NYC Internship program came online. I think we were maybe within like 6 months of starting. And so at that point, I'd been out of grad school for about a year or so. And so when I was in grad school, it didn't feel like there was a serious enough conversation around training scientists and researchers and postdocs in this space of entrepreneurship, or even introducing them to opportunities to try and see if this was an area we could all find success in. Another concrete example, when I was at Einstein, there was no, I think there's like the bio or the entrepreneurship club at Einstein. My friend started that because—
Yeah, there's a club. Yeah.
Yeah, my friend started it because there was enough of us just sitting around talking about it that, we wanted it to feel more concrete and more serious. And so, when I started grad school and then to now to see not just programs like this existing, but the city and the state actually putting large amounts of money into making New York City a space and an ecosystem where people want to actually stay and do things. 10 years ago, I just don't know I'm sure there were conversations around it for sure. But I think for me, the biggest trend is just that New York is really taking it seriously, as they should.
Can I ask a question?
Go for it. Yeah.
For Matt. So in your field, yeah, you mentioned that a background in science is like relevant. What about also people with CFA level 1s or maybe all 3, or financial modeling experience? Do applicants usually couple that with their science background when they apply?
Yeah, I would say it's helpful, but not necessary. Again, it's something I find it a lot easier to teach someone the business side of things rather than the science side. That takes, as you're earning your PhD, your MD, your master's, that takes years and years of expertise and background. And for your ability to evaluate an opportunity, an investment opportunity, is based on your science background mostly. So obviously you have to be able to translate that into a business opportunity and an evaluation of that business. But again, it's all based on being able to evaluate the data, both preclinically and clinically. And so a scientific background is the most important for me. But again, it's helpful. And that's one thing you can, I guess, be exposed to as an undergrad or a graduate student, taking a look at perhaps some of the financial modeling aspects of valuation and taking a look at a company or drug or device and looking at how to evaluate its potential from a financial point of view. But that's something I find it a lot easier to teach people than having them come in with a strong scientific background.
Thanks.
Thanks for the question, Maurice. I also wanted to highlight, we're at the point where I have a couple more questions for our panelists, but please, interns, think about questions that you want to ask. You can use the hand raise function. You can type in the chat. We'll also, once I end this section, have dedicated time to ask the panelists questions and chat as well. So we've heard some about the optimism. It seems like there's a lot of optimism and growth in the life sciences. What are some things, a question for all of you, what are some obstacles you see in the industry, and how are you or your organization working on overcoming these obstacles?
Oh, I'll start with this one, if it's okay. And this, I think everyone will be very pleased to hear this, that at least all the interns, there's a shortage of talent. That is for us the #1 challenge right now. We honestly cannot find enough people to fill our open jobs. And, it's everything. It's not just, we have everything from MDs, PhDs on staff to copywriters to art directors, and across the board, it's a challenge, not just for us at Havas, but I know our competitors and just our entire industry to really find good talent. So much so that we're kind of addressing the challenge by looking outside of New York. And we've created these like little hubs, satellite offices in like Miami, Chicago, and Dallas, and just trying to like kind of broaden our footprint to bring in more talent. So I think that's really the one thing that's holding us back. And like I said, I think it's good for everyone that's on this call because you definitely picked the right industry.
Matt or Sabriya, do you have anything to add, any obstacles that you're seeing that you are addressing in your work?
Yeah, I mean, I think one big obstacle always is finding the right people for sure. But then I also think it's just creating, a community and a network of people doing the thing that you're doing where you're at. So I know in New York, it can feel like everyone is so busy and, there's millions of us running all around. But I think that having more cohesive conversations around building a stronger biotech community in New York City. How can we help each other, right? It's, I'm looking for someone to hire. Do you know someone? Or we're looking for new lab space. Do you know where we could go? Do you know the right person we should be talking to? And so, really just creating a more tight-knit community around what we're all doing. I mean, I say that it is a challenge while with the understanding too that that is something that we're definitely, everyone I think is working on, individual clubs at different colleges or universities, programs like this, organizations like New York Bio that host things. So it is, I mean, it's still a challenge, but a challenge that I know a lot of people are working on.
Yeah, one of the challenges that we've really seen and I've seen over the last several years is keeping up with the growth of the industry. I mean, we've had just exponential growth in terms of the number of new public companies, the new private companies, and being able to keep track of that evolution and how fast it's been. So it's it's, I'd echo Shazia's comments in terms of, talent acquisition, to build a team, to be able to, focus on and continue to maintain a presence and understand the new companies that are coming out, because they're coming faster and more plentiful than ever before, really, over the last 3 years. So it's very exciting, it's dynamic, it's fun, but keeping up with them is the challenge.
So I think we've heard a good amount about the fact that the industry is growing. There are definitely opportunities. There's a need for people entering different parts of the industry. And we have a lot of people at the beginning of their career on the call. So I'm wondering if we can end at least this part of the questions with some advice you have for interns to make the most out of their internship, or just any general advice that you have for someone starting out their career.
I have lots of advice, I'm sure. But I feel like specifically as it relates to these internships, I would say pay attention to the things that you like while also understanding the things that you don't like. Because sometimes knowing the things you don't want to do is more important. I shouldn't say more important, is as important as knowing what you do want to do. So maybe you are at an internship and you're like, you know what? Like, this isn't really my vibe, or like, I don't really like doing this particular thing. But you know that now. I think when I was as part of the grad program, a lot of my students would, they would say, I think I want to do this. I think I want to be in this field. And I would, say to them, well, why? What do you specifically want to do? And then it was, I'm not sure. I think this just sounds interesting. And so, which is very good to know. But until you actually do the thing, until you have some experience with it, you really aren't going to be able to form a concrete understanding of whether or not, you do like it. For example, I was really into, like I said, working in infectious diseases. I worked in a BSL-4 lab for a full year, and I was like, it seems really cool watching this on TV, but having to suit up all the time and having to like go through all these procedures every single day, does get a little tiresome. And so, I tried it. And I said, okay, I'm glad I had that experience, and this is what I learned from it. So I think the piece of advice is, like I said, just be as aware of what you like as what you don't like as you're going through your internships.
My advice would be to ask questions, for more responsibility. If you're try to gain exposure to different aspects of the business. And as you ask for more responsibility, continue to ask questions from your manager. And so you learn actually what you're doing. And with that responsibility and other parts of the business, you're able to get a sense in terms of what that position is, what the day-to-day aspects are, and to Sabriya's point, things that you enjoy, and things that you don't. I mean, every job is going to be, have aspects to it that people don't want to do. But at the same time, looking for a job that keeps you energized, keeps you fulfilled, and understanding what those opportunities are at the different platforms you're at is crucial. So always ask questions, ask for more responsibility, be engaged. And if you're sitting there twiddling your thumbs, go knock on your manager's door and ask them how you can help. And that's the best thing to do right now with an internship, I would say.
Yeah, I would say just like look outside your group for work as well. I think a lot of times, interns feel, okay, I've come into this specific group and this is, and I'm not sure how it's structured at different companies, but I know like at our company, it's like, okay, let's say you come in as a copywriting intern. You don't have to stay as a copywriting intern. Get yourself invited to the strategy meetings, get yourself invited to the innovation meetings, get yourself invited to the new business meetings, just go outside of your group and just introduce yourself and say, hey, I'm just curious, what do you guys work on? What are you working on? No one will say no to you. I can almost guarantee, like 99.9% of the time, people will be very happy to kind of accommodate and include you. So just, speak up and kind of look outside your group.
Thank you. Thank you, all three of you. That is great ending advice for at least this part. We do have another 20 or so minutes scheduled for this event. So I'm going to leave some space for interns to ask any questions. You can either ask it out loud or type something in the chat.
Do an icebreaker question. Kind of a follow-up to that question of advice for interns, but specific to what Shazia said earlier in the call about how you really look for young people to talk about how to do things differently and say, you know, the way you're doing things, maybe there's a better way to do it, which sounds great, but it's also, especially for a young person, that's really hard to do. And I'd love to hear your advice of how someone starting their career can point out to more senior people in a company, or could ask the question, you know, how might we do this differently, and come up with ideas without seeming either arrogant or know-it-all or pushy in doing so.
I think if you do it respectfully, I can't imagine, you know, I think there's a way to do it where you're truly, you understand kind of what the challenges are and maybe why they didn't think of this before, and do it in a way that's like not like, oh my God, I can't believe you guys have never thought of this, idiots. You know, I at least, I know when I have interns and they look at, you know, just even things like, and I'll just use recruiting as an example. We created a fellowship program a couple of years ago. And one of the things that came out of actually one of our interns, they were like, you know what would be really great is when you bring in these fellows, that it's truly a rotation versus just putting them in one group and leaving them in one group for 6 months and then asking them, is this what you like? And then rotating them. So now we actually, from day one, we started off as the program is really designed as a rotation. And that's something that an intern was looking at it from a very selfish point of view, I guess, because they really didn't know what they wanted to do. But like them, there are many kids that kind of come into, whether it's an advertising agency or any job, not 100% sure what path they want to take, and having exposure right off the bat to many different things is great. And you know, just if you do it respectfully, if you do it in a way that's truly like, hey, this may not seem like a problem, but maybe you should look at it this way and why this could potentially make what you're already offering even better. I think that's just the right way to do it. Otherwise, you know, I don't know how companies will continue to evolve if the newer talent that we're hiring, the new fresh brains that are coming into our business don't challenge us. So at least I'm open to it. And I know Havas is.
Yeah, and I think to Shazia's point too, you know, as someone who also, when I was, you know, a grad student or in meetings, I was like, oh, should I say this? I don't know. There are inherent power dynamics, of course, in any work situation, especially if you come in as an intern or a first-time employee. And so, you know, obviously there's not going to be kind of one size fits all solutions. But I have often found that if people in, maybe it's your supervisor or someone else says to you, well, what do you think? They are actually asking and really looking for you to give them an honest answer. And again, as long as you do it in a respectful way. And, you know, I think what, you know, Shazia was saying is, you know, if you're in a room of 100 people, you're not standing up to a microphone and saying, oh, come on, guys, like, I can't believe, you know, like this is, you know, I might be the new person, but here's how I see things. You know, maybe it's not standing up in those meetings, or maybe it's just pulling your supervisor aside and saying, hey, do you have 10 minutes? I just had an idea that I wanted to run by you. And I also want to ask you in another setting or in another meeting, what do you think would be a good way for me to raise this? I've often found sometimes if you have a little bit of a script in mind, then it makes it easier to speak up. So I think that there's many different ways that you can have your voice be heard. Of course, with the understanding that there are always going to be some power dynamics in situations at the workplace.
I would echo Sabriya's recommendation. I mean, if you're coming with an idea, a new idea, I would put it together as a proposal and well thought out, put together proposal and take your manager aside and this is an idea and what do you think about it? And I've had that happen to me multiple times in my career where an associate or another, somebody that I'm in charge of comes to me with a proposal, but when it's well thought out, well-rounded, and I'm more likely to approve it and engage with them. But yeah, that's I mean, bottom line is, put it together and have it, more fully thought through.
We have a question in the chat from Drew. What is a typical workday like in healthcare equity research? So this one's for you, Matt.
Yeah, so one of the things that I love about healthcare equity research is it's a very dynamic and fast-paced environment. So on a typical day, we're watching news flow for the companies that we follow on a regular basis. So we follow as a group about 100 companies. I follow specifically about 25. So there are points in the day that companies typically announce news. There are basically from 6 a.m. to about 8:30 a.m. So you can't plan for these. Sometimes they announce they're going to have a conference call to discuss, phase 3 data or an acquisition of a product. Other times it's just you wake up and you go through your emails and your news and you look at what these companies are announcing. And then the other time during the day, typically companies announce news is after 4 o'clock, after the market closes. So you're reacting to the news on a rapid basis. So typically you have to analyze the announcement and how does it impact your investment thesis of that company. So typically, if the news item comes out in the morning, there's a conference call, we are writing up our research analysis by no later than 2 p.m. that day and making a recommendation to investors as to what to do with that announcement and what to do with that stock. Alternatively, frequently a news event comes out at 4 o'clock, 4:30. There's a conference call. We're publishing a note by 6:30 a.m. the next morning and hopping on our conference call to describe and tell our sales force what to recommend to investors and how it changes our investment thesis. At the same time, we're working on long-term projects in the background. So meeting new companies on a daily basis, working on new initiation reports, analyzing the competitive background or competitive space for the companies that we follow, and watching the competitive landscape as well. So it's a fast-paced, dynamic environment. You can plan for your day, and then frequently you get probably half of what you hope to get done in that day completed. And but the great thing about equity research is you're always meeting really smart, dynamic people, new companies, new technologies on a regular basis. So it's unlike doing bench research where you're kind of one gene, one protein, one area that you're focused on and become an expert and know that inside and out. This, you get broad exposure to multiple therapies, multiple areas, multiple technologies. So that's a typical day. Again, really fun, fast-paced. You're watching the market and reacting to the news items that come out on a regular basis.
Thanks. We have a question from Joseph. What were some challenges you all faced when transitioning from what you originally studied to what you do now, and how did you overcome them?
That's a good question. I'll start. So I studied, even though I was a finance major, I studied business. So it's going into advertising. It doesn't matter, I think, for at least my opinion is, it really didn't matter what you studied because you're learning from day one on the job. And I think there is such a difference between what you learn from a book and in a classroom than what you actually learn when you're actually thrown into the environment and having to do the job. So there's definitely a learning curve, I think, in whenever you go from academic life to whether it's corporate life or whatever career path you take. I think it's just a matter of being open and really just taking, kind of not being so hard on yourself if you're making mistakes, and understand that's part of the learning process. And, I think at least if you're not making mistakes, you're probably not really challenging yourself, and you're not really taking risks or trying new things or different ways to approach it. So my advice is just, I think be open, don't be so hard on yourself, and just expect to learn every single day. And if you're not, because once again, 17 years in this job, I'm still learning. And if I'm not learning, I think the day I stop learning is probably the day I will look for a new job. So
I think for me, because I have transitioned from a variety of fields, of all of that kind of encompassed in science, I think maybe the thing that was the same for each transition is that I learned how to ask questions differently. So for example, when I was a grad student, I had to ask very specific questions based on these experiments that I was doing, based on what I needed to do to put together a paper. But now in this job where we are trying to bring a drug to market, we are still asking scientific questions, but they look very different. The experiments that we have to design look really different. Just the processes that we have to do look different. Again, all still within science. And so for me, it is taking some time for me to kind of switch my brain from the way I used to be asking questions to, now, we have to ask questions differently. So I think the other thing for me that is a challenge is that, again, I'm just like looking at science from a completely different lens. And one of the lenses is truly a business side of things. And that is, not anything I sat down and took a class in. That was not anything I was, when I was in grad school, it was never like, well, like what does IPO mean? Or like, and so for a lot of that stuff, I am having to both learn on the job, but also read articles and papers and, consume information from sites that I didn't think that I would ever need to. So I think that is sort of how I'm overcoming some of the knowledge gaps that I have. Just like reading a lot more.
Yeah, I think for me, it was really transitioning from a different environment where you're working on experiments, you're working on and you're setting your own schedule. It's a different sense of deadlines when you're working in a consulting firm that you have to meet and achieve, and you're not just working on your own schedule. And learning to meet those deadlines and what you need to do to get there. And it's also figuring out where you find the information to be able to carry out the role that you want to. And it's being able to interview people, I think, and ask the right questions when you're speaking to a company and speaking to a client, asking the right questions and being able to approach these managers and in the C-suite and get the information you need from them, because if that's something I had never done before, and those interview skills are very important. It's almost being a journalist to a certain extent, and getting the information you need to write the reports and write and gather the information you need. So if you're not asking the right questions and doing it in different ways, it's learning those interview skills was something that I didn't have initially.
Thank you. So we have so far 2 people queued up. So I believe Sylvia has her hand raised, and then Binta has a question afterwards.
Hi. Thank you. So I've discovered recently that there are so many more options in the life sciences than I've previously considered, in part thanks to this program. Do you have any suggestions for someone who's considering their career options out of college?
So I can start because I feel like for 5 years when I was helping to teach students, this was a question that, like, right after their master's, they would say, well, what kind of job should I get? And, they would look at me to like give them the answer, but I would always say, well, what kind of job do you want? And so I think the thing, even to kind of support what I said earlier, is really pay attention to the things that you do like and the things you do not like as it pertains to this role. But I also am a very big list maker. So I would even say just like write out topics that you're interested in pursuing. I would even say go as granular as think about the kinds of environment you want to work in potentially. Do you want it to be a small company? Do you want it to be a large company? Do you like a lot of autonomy? Would you like someone who, checks in with you once a week? Because I think the thing is, if you you might not be able to check all those boxes with the next job, but I think if you have a certain idea of this is the kind of environment that I would like to be working in, this is the kind of thing that I would like to be working on, these are the kinds of skills that I want to be honing, then when you go and you look at all these job descriptions and you read about companies, it's a little easier to say, okay, this is one I definitely want to apply to. This has nothing to do with, what I want to do. And I would also say to allow yourself to change your mind. That you might get a job and then a year later you're like, you know what, again, I really thought I was going to like all of this and I don't. And of course people change or keep jobs for a variety of reasons. But I think that, being at this point in your career, because the world is so open to you, I know it can feel really overwhelming. I will say before I took the job at City College, I actually worked at BioBus for a few months. I also worked with AAAS for a few months. And so you might also be able to find organizations where you can do kind of these 3-month or 6-month stints to, again, just kind of not even like amass your toolkit of the skills that you want to keep developing and then of also things you have no interest in working on.
I would say at this point, take some risks. It's at this point in your life, it's wide open, and push yourself to do things you think are very challenging. And if it's in a job situation, when you get there, network as much as you can, not just internally, but also externally. Other people that are in the same industry as you, get to meet them, network with them. But right now, I think at this point in your life, take some risks and push yourself to do something that you thought you might not like to do. And if it's interesting to you, obviously. But this is the time to do it.
I'll just add, I think Sabriya and Matt both covered a lot of it, but I think environment's really important. And there's with life sciences, it's such a wide range of different types of environment that you can work in. Everything from a research lab to, I'll use advertising at the other extreme, because I think it's a creative, very different industry. And there's so much in between all of that. I'll just say, when we hire, we look for people that enjoy the science and like being in the science, in the world of science and life sciences, but at the same time really have a creative or a business interest, because that's the type of person that will do well in our environment. I think if you have that, I think knowing the environment, and it's okay to, like Sabriya said and Matt, that it's okay to take risk and try something. And if you don't like it, change your mind and go do something else, because once again, this industry, there's so many jobs and so many opportunities. Don't feel you have to kind of get yourself stuck into something and then stay there longer than you really need to.
And I just want to add one thing about that, the environment, because I agree wholeheartedly with that. And for myself, if the environment that I'm in, if the working environment that I'm in is not a supportive one, is not one that does allow me to make mistakes, is not one that does allow me to hone the skills that I want, it's in some ways for me, it doesn't matter what I'm working on, even if it's a thing that I love, because I will feel so drained every day that it will then become a job I don't want. And so I think that is, again, what I was kind of saying with, really think about the kinds of the environments in which you work the best, right? Is it a manager who, makes sure that you understand what you're doing, or is it maybe you do like someone who's like, okay, I'll check in with you at the end of the month, like just make sure you have it done, right? Is working with a 5-person company or a 500-person company important to you? So really think about, what do you feel like, or what is an environment you've been in where you have done your best work? And try to see, if the job that you are looking at has some of those things, because I just think it's really important.
I guess if you're also thinking about going into the finance aspects of biotechnology and healthcare, understand Wall Street a little bit. We heard from, I guess, Moraes earlier. He's working at a venture capital firm. There's also, besides venture capital, there's also other buy-side firms, as they call them, which are hedge funds, mutual funds that need people with scientific expertise to help them analyze those investment opportunities. There's the investment banking side of what, that's where I am, that's what I do. So there's research analysts, and then there's investment bankers as well that need to have scientific expertise to analyze the opportunities as well. So if you're thinking about finance, understand kind of the environment or the ecosystem there, where you can really bring your skills to bear.
Thank you so much.
And we are just past 7:30. Binta has a question to ask in person, so I'm just going to pass it off to Binta.
And that I appreciate everyone. I want to just point out one thing. I met with Sabriya a few years ago in her office, and the advice she gave me, which is a lot of the advice she shared with my fellow interns, really led me to where I'm at today. And I'm actually working at Havas as well. Nice to meet you, Shazia. What I've learned also is just to take that risk, like you said, and figure out what it is that I want to do. But my question is in regards to higher education now. I'm 5 months into my fellowship at Havas. I'm a finance fellow. I studied biology undergrad, and I wanted to know, as you finish undergrad, you kind of explore the option of doing a master's or someday a PhD. And I'm at that crossroads where I love science and I also love what I'm doing right now in finance with Havas. How important would you say it is to whether maybe get more industry experience before taking that leap, or is it still more like searching within the role that you're in, searching, finding your niche, within what you're doing, and using that to kind of make a decision on whether you should pursue a higher degree and kind of what route to go? It's a loaded question, but.
It does. First of all, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you worked for Havas. We have 5,000 people. First of all, I get asked that question a lot about, furthering education. Education's always good. I mean, you can never go wrong by, studying and getting a degree. It's a very personal thing. Is it required? Absolutely not. I would say at Havas, in advertising, you can get all of the experience that you're looking for on the science side without getting any further degree. We can move you into a different group. We have, you probably know, we have the team of that has the medical directors, but you don't necessarily need an MD. You can start off junior and by learning with them almost as an apprenticeship. So once again, it's a very personal decision. Is it required? Absolutely not. Will it hurt you? Absolutely not. It's education. So you reach out to me after and we could figure out how to, if you are interested in kind of looking at other paths within Havas, I can definitely help you.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Hi, Binta. It's very nice of you to share that. I would say a question to ask yourself, and maybe I shared this with you when we last chatted, but is how do you want to be spending your time? Right? Because time will pass no matter what you decide to do. And for me, when I made the decision to go to grad school, I had been working for 3 years, as I said, as at the NIH and then as a research tech at NYU. And there was something so intoxicating to me about the idea that I could go to school for a very specific thing and work with very smart people and learn how to do experiments. And like I said, be the one who was designing the experiments versus being the one who was told how to do the experiments. And that doesn't mean that you have to go to grad school to learn how to design experiments. But I think for me, I just really wanted to explore a very specific, I mean, I sort of already knew the question I wanted to explore, which was about host pathogen interactions. You don't necessarily need that to go to grad school, but what someone said to me was, okay, well, you know, grad school is anywhere from 5 to 6 years. If you don't go to grad school, like, what would you be doing? And I sort of was like, well, yeah, I guess I would get a job, but I also knew that I would regret not going at a certain point because, again, like I said, I just really deeply felt like I had this calling to go to grad school, specifically as to get a PhD. And like I said, after that, I was like, okay, like I did it. And now I don't think I want to do lab work anymore. So I just think that's, for me, was an important question to ask. How did I want to be spending my time? Because as I'm sure we're all aware, you know, your time is your most valuable currency. And so you have to be very mindful about how you spend it. And so if you want to spend it working and, you know, getting experience that way, that's fantastic. Also, if you want to spend it, you know, being in school and kind of doing formal learning in that way, that's also fantastic. So I just think it is a little bit of a soul searching question for sure. But I think to Shazia's point, no wrong answer.
I don't know if Matt, you wanted to add anything, or we can go past.
No, I think Shazia and Sabriya covered it pretty well.
Okay, great. So we are past 7:30. Thank you, interns, for asking great questions. Thank you so much for panelists for spending this time with us. As Sabriya said, time is your most valuable currency. So thank you for spending an hour with us. And also just thank you for being great partners to our program. Each of your companies have hired interns for multiple years, and some of your interns are here today. So again, thank you for that, and thank you for participating.